Compañeros, welcome to another edition of the SQL Data Partners Podcast. I'm Carlos Chacon. It's good to be back with you, compañeros. We've been gone for a couple of weeks, so thanks for your patience there. We have an exciting episode, so episode 200. It's a little bit near and dear to my heart, right? So when I started 4 years ago, I don't know that I ever thought about what episode 200 would look like, but here it is. And we have a special guest for you today. So Bob Ward is in the house. Woo-hoo.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. 200. I can't believe you invited for your 200th episode. That's amazing.
Yes. Well, you know, we had
very honored.
Get the big guns out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for being here with us, right? And so we have changed up the program slightly. So compañeros, you'll notice, of course, Bob, you won't know because you haven't listened, but we have new music for the podcast, and so that hopefully is fun. Let's see.
Eugene, but then we brought him back immediately because the fans demanded it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, actually, no. I'm twin brother Boo. Right. We killed off Eugene and.
Eugene. Yes.
Well, yeah. Well, he gave his mother my cell phone number. And
I would not do that. My mom calls me like 6 times a day. I actually got an Amazon Echo so that I can video call.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it's just been bad because we used to take her into like this adult daycare, medical center kind of thing, and we haven't been able to do that. And I love my mom, but she's bored and lonely. So
I know my mom is in the same situation right now. It's really difficult.
Yeah,
you know?
It's tough. It's tough.
So no, I would never give her your number. That would be a great unkindness.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I know.
Okay, so we have Bob Ward, and we're going to kind of jump into it slightly here a little bit because his bio requires it.
So, it does. Oh no, what are you going to say? What's my bio? Dallas Cowboys fan. That's what you should say.
That's right. Well, so I do have that, and so
Okay.
I agreed. So one of the things that I should say is that people have suggested, hey, you need to get Bob on the program, and I'm like,
Oh, that's so nice.
The problem is he's a Cowboys fan.
Oh, dear.
That is a problem.
That goes against all your nature, doesn't it?
As a lowly Redskins fan, right?
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
This is the only time of the year that I get to enjoy, right? When they're not playing.
We're all 0-0, right?
That's right.
It's the same.
Okay, so for those of you who have been under a rock somewhere, I suppose, right? So Bob is the principal architect for the Microsoft Azure SQL Data Team. I hope that's still correct.
That's a long title. What does that even mean?
But here's the interesting piece. Now, you've worked at Microsoft and have been involved with every version of SQL Server shipped.
That's true.
That's from
True statement.
OS2 1.1
Was 2.1, yeah.
to the SQL Server 2019. Now
this is tablet days, stone and tablet days. Yes,
yeah, that's right.
Pretty much.
I'm like, I don't know that I have ever heard it referred to as OS2 1.1.
So here we go, guys. Here these are the diskettes. I'm not making this up. These are the diskettes to install SQL back then. So I still have this in my drawer.
Oh, you mean the save icon? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It's true. 1993 is when I joined the company, and OS2 1.1 was what I first started working on back in those days. I know, it's crazy.
Wow. Yeah, so it's come a long ways.
Oh, the evolution of SQL is amazing, right? I mean, think back to diskettes, right?
Sure.
To enterprise systems with petabytes of data and huge scaled servers, now in the cloud, now on the edge. I mean, you probably saw that announcement at Build, right? SQL on an ARMed Raspberry Pi device. So SQL now on one of these, a little Raspberry Pi. So, crazy, great, amazing story, quite frankly, for the history of this product.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
It has, it has come in, it's so, I don't know if it's different directions, right? But so maybe simplistic to get it back on Raspberry Pi, but also the number of things that you can do with SQL Server now, right?
Well, the amazing thing, if you think about it just real quick, I'll make sure.
Sure.
I throw in all those little nuggets for you. I know you're trying to get this started here. I'm just talking over you.
No.
Hey, this thing right here is the same engine, right? I mean, the engine that goes into this, it's just smaller footprint, is the same engine that powers 19. It powers containers, Linux, Azure, Everywhere
Wow.
SQL exists, it is the same code-based engine. We just, have different flavors of it and different ways to deploy it. And sometimes we light up different features in certain ways. That's one of the things that I love so much about working on this product, is even going back to the OS2 1.1 days. I always worked with a group of developers that really believed in the core fundamental principles of security, availability, and performance. I call that the meat and potatoes of SQL Server. That's kind of a Texan term, meat and potatoes. But it is, it's the core of what we do. And then we put all this stuff around it, right? So that's what I love. So this little thing right here, Raspberry Pi, is still got all that functionality built into the engine. So it's pretty cool.
Wow.
Nice.
That is cool. Man, so I hate to detract, right? But just a couple of things before we jump into
Well, I'm
it.
the one throwing off your show. I'm never coming back, right?
This is Carlos's user voice tickets, right?
Yeah, exactly.
My airing of grievances, 1 through 40.
the airing of grievances. I like it. That's right.
Oh, so because Bob's on the program and I saw that you have been involved with the SQL Server 2019 revealed, right? We're gonna figure out a way. I don't know how, and Amanda is gonna have her blood pressure is gonna rise when she hears this on the recording. But we're gonna figure out a way to give away some books.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do.
Oh, here we go.
I'll tell you what I'll do. Figure it out. I don't know how many thinking of, maybe just top of your head.
Oh, so we're a modest group, so single digits is what we were thinking, right?
I will give you those
10?
books.
Oh, there we go.
If you'll give me your mailing address, I have in my office here some books. So whatever books you decide to do, I will donate these books to you, and I'll sign them.
Oh, well, so now I was going to say the three of us might be on there. We might have to increase that.
Yeah. By the way, it's going to be 10 books. It's really 7 books, actually. No, I'm really being serious. Happy to ship those books to you, and I'll sign each one of them. So
there you go. Compañeros, you heard it here. If you want to sign SQL Server Revealed 2019 of it from A-Press Media, let us know. You can, again, we'll figure out, but by the end of the show, I'll figure out a way, or I'll think of a way for you guys to get that information to us. But as always, right, you can go SQLDataPartners.com, and today's actually keyword is going to be Bob Ward. So SQLDataPartners.com/Bob Ward, or episode 200, and we'll have the information on there for you to grab those books. So as we noticed, so Bob's actually done a little video. He's kind of showed us how we're going to start using that a little bit. We're going to try to go back to YouTube. I'm not promising demos just yet, right? We're still kind of just audio, but at least you get to see us, which may or may not be a good thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're interested in consuming it that way, that will be available here shortly. So t-shirts, we've talked about t-shirts in the past, and we've made them available, but several of you have come up and said, well, hey, I'd love to support the podcast in some way. Don't, send me a t-shirt, let me buy it. And so we are going to make those available on Amazon. So you can also go to SQLDataPartners.com/t-shirts, and that will kind of point you there, or search for SQL Data Partners on Amazon. By the time this goes live, that will be available.
Nice.
So, and thanks everybody for your support there.
SQLDataPartners.com/t-shirt, singular.
Ooh, t-shirt. Thank you.
That's why Kevin's on this show. Makes sense.
I am here.
Coming together now.
He's here for like pendantry and derailing, right? So he brings us on task for tiny details and then way off task.
Perfect.
I do.
Yep.
Okay. So with that, I get to jump into some of these pieces, right? And you mentioned in the beginning, so SQL Server has had this evolution. Now it's on a Raspberry Pi, right? We've talked about Linux. So it seems to be, expanding in its scope, but at the same time, a lot of folks are nervous. And I'll use the influence of NoSQL, right, into the mix. And particularly from a developer perspective, right? It's like, hey, I don't want to have to think about what my data looks like, right? I just want to be able to, easy button it. Maybe I'll take some technical debt along the way, but I just want to be able to slap it in somewhere, and then I'll deal with reporting later. And so that gives those of us who have been working with, SQL Server, the heebie-jeebies a little bit, right? So again, we're not necessarily looking for, the secret sauce or any secret information here, but I guess I'm looking for your thoughts. You've dedicated, right, 26 years to SQL Server, right?
26 years plus now, almost 27.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on the evolution of SQL Server? Like, who's going to be using it? And maybe, and admittedly, so those of us who are listening to the podcast, supporting it, developing with it, is that going to change? Are only big, like financial institutions going to be using it? Like, what's your take there?
That's a fair question, because of all the different form factors we live in. If you first take the Pi example, we specifically built that because of developers. I mean, developers came to us and said, this is what we have. We have IoT type applications we're building, but we have scenarios where we need to do processing on the device. We can't always be able to ship raw data from these devices to, say, a hub or even directly to the cloud.
Because there's too much data?
Not just that, but sometimes they're disconnected scenarios or semi-connected scenarios. Think about like a mining company or something.
Right.
So great examples like a mining company. Mining company has the need to do machine learning processing and actual data processing at the mine, but not be connected all the time. Right. So if they have devices like this, where they can have a database engine that includes things like time series and machine learning models and so forth, then we could actually put information on there. It could do processing and then connect what it needs to. And instead of sending all just the raw results, why not send processed results, right? So this is developers telling us and other companies that that's what they need. And we just said, our SQL engine can do these things. Why wouldn't we just find a way? So we said, in order to do this, we need to reduce the footprint, the memory footprint of SQL Server, the disk footprint and so forth. So you're going to be blown away, but we can do this now in 300 meg. SQL Server, the engine runs on a 300 meg footprint on this. So that's crazy given how gigabyte size the engine itself can take.
No, exactly.
And almost everything's there to do the engine. So one scenario would be is that we think developers want that kind of functionality, and it's not like all the NoSQL options just come with all of that. Think of all the richness that SQL Server just comes with this engine.
Sure.
You pick on SQL Server 2019 with all the stuff that we've got under the product. Well, what if you need to do a DevOps scenario with containers? I just did a demonstration at Build using Azure DevOps and Pipelines, where I showed how to use Azure Pipelines to automatically do SQL testing in a way for developers that have not been thought of before. And it's a little more difficult to do that with, say, like a NoSQL system. I showed a demo where you need to go run SQL Server tests against a new cumulative update of SQL. But you don't want to use a shared development server because you're always colliding with all your devs. Sure. These devs are terrible. They're always colliding. They're always messing up the SQL Server, changing the configuration, slapping on a new CU, and nobody needs that. So we use Azure Pipelines, which dynamically spins up virtual machines with containers in them and runs automated tests by you simply making a small change to a file. You make a change to a file in your GitHub repository, you push that up to your GitHub repository, and boom, the testing already runs automatically for you, all using containerization. Wow. We do that in SQL. In the engine team, that's how we test SQL Server. We use Azure Pipelines and containers to do automated tests for thousands of containers out there for different SQL Server configurations, bug fixes, enhancements, and so forth. So those are just two scenarios where I think we've got an advantage because of the richness that the SQL Server platform provides. If you've heard me speak about SQL 19, I don't call it an engine anymore. Certainly the engine's a big part of it. I call it a platform because it includes big data clusters, polybase, machine learning. I mean, think of all this stuff that just is there with it. So I think we have a huge advantage in that space that it can be used for so many different things, whether it's operational or analytical or now machine learning or big data. Name a NoSQL product that can really do that today. And it's not like I'm trying to compete with them necessarily. I'm just saying that's where the relevance, I think, in SQL Server is, has been in the past and it still is today.
So what I'm hearing, right, and Eugene and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that we still need to think about ultimately the full pipeline or the full breadth, right, of what it is that our applications or our pain points are, and the ability to store data is simply not the only function, right? Is that fair?
Well, I mean, I think, so I just did a course on Azure Event Hubs, and kind of the analogy that I use with that compared to a database, because I'm biased, and so my first clip is why not use a database, a normal relational database, and then one of the architects for Azure Event Hubs said maybe I took too long on the ACID compliance piece, right? And it's yeah, okay, that's fair, but the analogy I use is comparing a luge to an off-road Jeep. Event Hubs is like a luge. Like, if you're trying to do this one thing, it is super fast, it is super performant, it is super focused. But I wouldn't try and get groceries with it, right?
Right.
And to me, based on what, Bob is saying, SQL Server feels more like an off-road Jeep because it can handle a variety of circumstances. And even better, you may have a company where you have those different terrains, those different circumstances. And so if you can use the same tool for that Raspberry Pi, for that DevOps, for that enterprise, terabyte database, there's some value there that's more than just the individual solutions.
Absolutely. Also, just think about the T-SQL language. Right. I don't know if you noticed or not, but when we were looking at machine learning services, we were trying to study what should we do. So we'd start with R, and then we did Python. And then we're like, what should we do next? And somebody said, that's probably okay because T-SQL is actually the third most popular language for data scientists in the world. So the T-SQL language is across everything we do with SQL Server, whether it's on Azure, Linux, containers, Edge, you name it. And then look what we do with it. We just extend that language. Graph database is a developer feature we offered, right, in SQL 17. Kind of an underrated feature, in my opinion. It's pretty good. We actually enhanced it in 19 as well. It's all T-SQL based because people said, I don't want to have to go learn another language for that.
Right.
You use Polybase. It's T-SQL external tables. You do machine learning. It's all based on T-SQL. So I think it's underrated, in my opinion, the fact that we have a standardization for a language and an interface that can do so many things like Eugene just talked about.
Yeah.
And then able to divide some of those tasks, right? So, I mean,
correct.
I would think that there is a good portion of those people that can do T-SQL that don't necessarily consider themselves developers.
Right.
And
but
so
they are.
Yeah. But
they don't realize
right.
it, right? And think about all the NoSQL systems that always pivot to SQL as a language. You ever seen that? Everybody's got a SQL adapter.
Kevin, don't you have a law about that?
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
I think Kevin Fiesel's law.
Every data platform technology, as it matures, eventually develops a SQL interface.
Yeah.
Is that not true? I mean, that's.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
Now, is that coined already, or can we call that the Fiesel principle?
No, I've already done that. I've had
already
that
coined it.
He's copyrighted that one a long time ago. So, I mean, it sounds kind of trite to say. It may sound trite to say that, and it sounds like a marketing campaign. T-SQL is consistent. It's true, man. Think about it. Think about how consistent that language is, and we just keep extending the language versus making you do a new language.
Right.
Most people I talk to, when I really make them realize that, they're like, you know what? I hadn't thought about that. That's a pretty powerful tool belt, and it really makes a huge difference for developers for portability, right?
No, that's right. When you think about, I mean, we love Power BI, right? But even like Power BI, they've introduced new languages, right? And so you're like, oh man.
Yeah, those Adam Stackson people like that, you just can't. What are you gonna do with this guy in the cube person?
You can tell them apart because they're bald, right? That's how you spot them.
Oh man, that was Eugene.
I know. Well, I think they consider me friend. I don't know, so I think I'm friends with them.
Well, I was on his podcast not long ago. I might not get invited back after that one. So
yeah, sorry, guilty by association.
Yes,
well, see, you can see it. You can tell I'm a wannabe, right? Trying to.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, I think a related thing to what we're talking about is, if you're a database administrator, like a Microsoft SQL Server database administrator, the future looks kind of scary, and it's nice to think that, okay, maybe you can, ride this magic carpet into the future a little bit. You're still going to have to start learning some Azure and some of these other pieces, but it's nice to know that, like, this skill set that you may have built up over decades potentially is not going to just be obsoleted overnight. Because, I mean, you look at Azure and you look at where things going, and it's easy to feel that way. It's easy to feel that, okay, I've gone from a Swiss Army knife that was good at a bunch of things to now 15 different Azure scalpels that are all slightly different sizes, and I have to figure out which one to use.
Yeah, right, sure.
You think about Azure, I've just recently been spending some time in that space, and I'm currently actually working on some workshops for Azure SQL based on people that know SQL Server. Like, I'm trying to help them translate that knowledge, that world. Because that's me. I'm a SQL Server person, right? So I started talking to my cloud team, the Azure team, and started looking at it. And there is so much there to learn. Trust me, as much as we pour into the cloud to help you do things, there is so much work for SQL Server DBAs, developers, administrators to still do in the cloud. It's not a hit a button and you never touch it again. It's just definitely not that. But yeah, there's some really powerful things in it that actually you'll love. Like, how many people love putting together an availability group in this complex configuration and maintaining that? I mean, and getting paged in the middle of the night for it. How about avoiding some of those kind of type scenarios and focusing on other things? That's kind of what we're trying to do, and that's a good example of what Azure can do.
Yeah, no question. I can focus on the good stuff, right? And
Yeah.
And the business processes. I mean, I always go back to that there are going to be things, circumstances that your business will need.
Absolutely.
That you'll have to be able to understand.
Absolutely.
Right? So then, as we've kind of gotten to 2019.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick amongst all your children, right? So, but do you have a favorite feature, or do you have something that you're most geeked out about, maybe?
Oh man, my developers are all listening to this. I'm gonna make somebody mad, right?
Yeah.
So being an engine guy from way back,
Sure.
like, I don't know if you guys remember, I used to do a lot of engine internal talks. You guys remember some of those, inside latching and those kind of things? I still get questions about that all the time.
Right.
And in fact, I'll make a quick plug for these guys. There's something called the 8KB conference coming up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's, actually hosted in my part of the town.
Oh, is that right?
Nice.
Mark Wilkinson out of the Triangle area. Also, Andrew Prisky and Anthony Nocentino.
Yeah. So Anthony was a tech reviewer of one of my books and had said, hey, we would love for you to do this event. And I said, let me revive my SQL memory talk. So I've got like a memory internals talk I'm doing as part of that event. And that's fun for me. I don't do those as much anymore. Right. But I'm an engine guy, tried and true, even though I love all these great features around it. So there's this feature called accelerated database recovery. Have y'all seen that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a little fun here in the fun. So Carlos kicks off this transaction and deletes 1 billion rows in a transaction, right? He just gets off and clicks this.
Because I don't believe in where clauses, right?
He made a mistake, right? So Kevin is really, really mad. So he tries to kill Carlos. Kill his session. So he goes in and he runs the kill command to kill Carlos's session, right? And it goes into this rollback state. So he really wants to kill him now. Like he's really mad at him. Yeah. And the business is down at this point. It's really, really bad. So Eugene comes along and says, I read on the internet that Paul Randall said that if you just crash SQL Server, it'll just magically come back up in this scenario. So Eugene goes off and crashes SQL Server, and it comes back up and it goes in the error log and it says 1%, 2%, 3% or whatever. And the whole time your business is down. And I'm the guy managing the transaction log and it's growing out of control. Does this sound familiar to you? I mean, I was in support, as you guys know, for many years, and I'm not making this up. That was a very common call for us. And customers constantly would say, well, how long is it going to take? And I'm like, as long as it takes to roll this back.
That's right.
So accelerated database recovery literally gets rid of that entire scenario. And anytime I present, everybody says, this can't be for free, which it's not. But you'd be surprised the impact it may not have on you. So for example, we have this white paper we wrote with all the details in it. And in there, we talk about the TPCE benchmark, which is kind of a common OTP mixture type thing. Yep, We've seen as low as like 3 to 5% impact of turning this on and running that benchmark. Now, if I told you that I could maybe give you a 3% hit overall and then give you all of that, you might sign up for it, right? Sure. Consider the fact that in Azure, we ran this on 1 million databases before we shipped it in SQL 19. And by default, it's on in Azure. You just spin up a database, we just put it on by default for you.
Sure.
It is the only way that we could actually achieve hyperscale, the new hyperscale functionality for Azure, to be able to do that and give you the SLAs that come with it. So it is one of the coolest, most innovative technologies I've ever been a part of Microsoft. And I just love telling that story though, where Carlos, did something and Kevin tried to kill, session, and then Eugene, the whole thing, right? So Paul Randall will probably hear this and send me some nasty email because I always use him as that example. and he says to me, well, I don't tell people to do that. I'm like, I'm sure somewhere along you probably did tell somebody to do that, actually. Just kidding. Paul's an old friend of mine. That's why I use him. But anyways, it's my favorite feature.
What you're forgetting is some corruption scenario.
Right? Some corruption scenario, exactly. It is by far my favorite feature because it's just an option you turn on with your database. We do all this stuff. What we do is we use what's called a persisted version store in your database. It's kind of like the version store that you have today for a snapshot isolation, but it's different. But it looks similar, but it's used for recovery purposes. And consider failovers now. That's the reason we do it in Azure. So if you got an availability group and you've got a secondary replica you're syncing, what are we always doing? We're always redoing transactions there, right? We're trying to roll forward all the time. Right. So when you fail over, we have to do the undo portion. Well, if you had this long-running transaction, a failover in an availability group scenario could take a while.
Sure.
Well, with this, it doesn't. It just immediately comes right up because the undo portion is so fast during this scenario. And then on your secondary replicas, the read transactions going on are using that version store, not tempdb. So that's very powerful as well for readable secondaries. So there's a lot of great uses of it. It's really, really cool technology. so anybody watching this, and for you guys also as well, go look on the internet on a search for constant time recovery. Search for constant time recovery. That's the original name of the project. And you'll see this white paper that we wrote. And I love this white paper because you want to geek out, man. I mean, it's got all the details of the internals of how this works, all the timings and experiments we did. But yeah, this is probably one of my big hero features that I show off all the time.
Very cool. So then now you mentioned some of the overhead, right?
Yes.
But is this everyone should turn it on? Kind of a recommendation? I'm saying everyone, right? I mean, there's always an exception, right? So I guess we have to caveat, right? We're going to throw all kinds of red flags on this.
In SQL Server, we have a little bit of philosophy in these things. We kind of taken a very conservative approach over the years and not made these things defaults. Where in Azure, we feel a little more empowered to turn these things on and let you turn them off in the cloud.
Right.
So that's how we've done that. And so in SQL Server 19, this is not on by default. Based on just my experiments with it, my testing with it, reading the paper and so forth, I think everyone should take a hard look at turning this on. It doesn't mean, obviously, today I'm recommending go to your production server, just flip the database a bit.
Fair,
you can do that. But it's something that you should take a really hard look that maybe it's for you, especially once you make that move to 19. It's independent of DB compat too. So it's not like you have to go to 19 and use the new DB compat. You can go to 19 and use an older DB compat, and this still works. So it's independent of that. That's why it's just got such great, rich functionality as the engine. But again, it's just like the feature in 19 for TempDB we did, which we took TempDB metadata and turned it into like hackathon tables. We don't make that a default either. We let you go ahead and opt in. So
sure.
SQL Server in the box, we have so many customers out there. You control your environment. We don't. In the cloud, we kind of control the back end. So we kind of let you do opt in. And so I think everybody should take a look at it, though. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Carlos is like, should I use this?
Yeah. Right.
Well, so I guess where I was going is how I guess so in the new Microsoft, right? Listening to customers and bringing things in. My question was going to be is that where you're getting? Let me rephrase that.
Do you want to know where this feature came from?
Sure.
Yeah.
It came from the cloud. So in the cloud, we use a DevOps model where the engineers themselves have to do a lot of the support work for the back end, right? And these are developers. It's like, I don't want to get paged in the middle of the night. So we were seeing all these problems like I just described to you, where customers had these issues, and they're like, surely there's a better way, that the engine can handle this in a better way. And then also we need to do hyperscale. We said, this hyperscale architecture requires something unique like this. So it was a combination of just pain points that we lived, your pain, and then also that we needed to innovate in things like hyperscale. That's where the project came from. And I remember when I first joined engineering, hearing about this back in 2016. It's like, constant time recovery, what is this thing? And I reached out to Peter Byrne, longtime friend of mine in the development team. Peter's been there forever, longer than me. So Peter, what is this thing? And he described it. I'm like, oh my goodness, this could be life-changing. It took us a couple of years to get it to market, but yeah, it's kind of a game changer for me. So
very cool. So eating your own dog food there.
Absolutely.
Bit, right? And then
You'd be surprised how much in the cloud that happens now. Pretty interesting. Yeah.
That's cool. So I know we just had Build, right? Lots of conferences. I mean, Ignite will happen, here, but in terms of, I guess where things are headed, or I don't know. I guess I'm not asking for it. Well, maybe I am asking for a scoop. Any scoop you can give us, Bob?
Well, the biggest thing we did at night was public preview for this bad boy, right? So let me see if I can open this up. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, here's my Pi device. Do you see that in there?
Now is that a Pi 4 you've got?
Yes.
I'm so mad that it requires a fan. Why does a Raspberry Pi require a CPU?
I'm not, I am definitely not a hardware geek, but it wasn't hard for me to put this together. But SQL Server contains, so SQL Server Edge, we call it Azure SQL Edge.
Yeah.
We did that for a very specific reason. We didn't want people to think this was a full-born SQL Server. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to kind of involve, when the final thing comes out, it'll logically be like a subscription model like Azure comes with, right? So it's kind of an Azure SQL product, but it is a SQL Server engine running in here. But that was the biggest announcement from the SQL perspective we made at Build for developers. There's other things that we have in the plate. You may have remembered last year at Ignite, we announced something called Azure Arc. We just kind of started that journey. We're in the middle of that journey right now. So we're currently having private preview for customers with it. That's an interesting beast in itself, right? Because this is now us trying to bring the world of platform as a service down to you. to your data center, to your servers. Imagine now you getting something, think about like a managed instance that you see today in the cloud. Imagine you getting a managed instance in your servers. We'll use Kubernetes as the power to make all that work. Kubernetes provides what we think is the best software infrastructure that we know that's going to give us platform-like capabilities to make all that work. So let me give you an example. So you see today when you go to Azure, we have something called like advanced threat protection. You may have seen some of that, security type models where we run machine learning models to help point out stuff to you. Imagine we could do that in your data center as a service running in your cluster with a SQL Server. Imagine you having a SQL Server in your cluster that's what we call evergreen or versionless. You know, if you look at Azure today, you never patch SQL. We do all that for you. And so imagine if you lived in that kind of world too, where we're constantly giving you changes or updates, and we're just kind of keeping your SQL up to date all the time. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. Azure Arc is, you know, people think Azure Arc is like this arc, like a circle. That's not the case. Arc is like an electric arc. You know, we're trying to arc together the world of the cloud and your data center in that hybrid way. So we didn't announce anything at Build for Arc, but that's something we're continuing to work on.
Sure.
And but Azure Edge was our big thing at Build that we made the announcement on.
Right. And again, I think about that in terms of accessibility, right? What do organizations want to do? They want to be able to develop. They want to be able to, you know, solve some of their problems. What do they not want to do? They don't want to be patching and, you know, all that.
You hear both ways on that. I mean, somebody says, I want a full control over that. I want to make sure I get to decide and so forth. And then you see some customers that are tired of, you know, maintenance windows on their own and having to go figure out when to patch and what to patch and doing it all themselves and patch windows.
So I felt like once maybe we're going off topic here, but I felt like once the DoD had signed on, that was going to kind of open the floodgates to be like, okay, well, I mean,
to be honest, that's a true statement. There are customers that have contacted us about Azure and said, well, heck, if the, you know, Jedi DoD thing is going to be a thing, then maybe I should look at you guys, right? Maybe we should take a look at it. So,
right.
You know, I'm spending a lot of time on Azure right now, and I really am impressed with the technology we have put behind the scenes. You look at hyperscale as well, that's pretty amazing technology. How would you like to be able to restore, you know, a database of massive sizes of terabytes in 5 minutes or something? I mean, because we're using snapshots and those kind of type things. And yeah, it's good stuff. And the cloud does give us ability to do things that we can't do on premises. You know, you control the deployment on premises.
Right.
We don't, but we control it in the cloud, and we have full reign over how we do that. We got to keep it running. We have to meet SLAs, but since we have that ability, we can do a lot of different things that we need to do to make sure that the software is kept maintained and enhanced. And we can do things like whitelisting. People don't even know that. Like, we can introduce a new feature, and we can call Carlos and say, hey, we're going to only let you use this right now for a week and try it out. Well, how do I do that on premises? I can't do that. Give you a special code or something, right? So Arc might give you that same functionality. If you sign up with us and say, look, I'll be an Arc customer, then we would just keep you, you know, up to date all the time, and you wouldn't even be looking at that. So that's the thinking. Bring that platform-like capabilities down to your data center. And then also we tie it together. If you allowed us in a semi-connected or connected way, you would tie up and you would go into the Azure portal and see all your assets, including things going in your data center. Potentially even think about scenarios where you could do pay-as-you-go SQL servers running in your data center versus the licensing model used today.
Yeah. Well.
But those are the things we're looking at. I mean, we're always looking at new stuff for SQL Server. I mean, there's this really smart guy named Slava Oaks that works on our team. People don't really know who he is, right? He's the godfather of SQL Server. So he's one of the smartest guys. I mean, I am Penny from the Big Bang Theory when I'm in a room with Slava. Slava's on the board drawing, and I'm like, what? 5?
Are we still talking about SQL Server?
Exactly. But he's also one of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. And so he's such a great guy to talk to. But he is always coming up with innovation, and we continue to do that. Even after shipping 19, we're still thinking of really cool new stuff that we want to do down the road.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, it's a part of that breakneck pace, right? So we had like, there's 14, 16, 17, 19.
Yeah, we got kind of fast, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm not expecting a 20 because we haven't heard a 2020 or 2020 or 2021, right? So is that, you feel like, is the 2-year cycle like a good fit, or?
It's funny you mentioned that. I don't know if you guys heard a guy named Connor Cunningham. You guys know Connor? Connor, a lot of people, Connor spoke a lot previously in events in the past. Bits is one of his favorites ones he does.
Sure.
And you've seen him at PASS with me on stage, right? You see us doing the Dallas Cowboys stuff and everything right every year. Deep friend of mine, another one of the smaartest guys I know. And so he's our chief architect to release SQL Server. And he tells me that if we wanted to, with our engineering systems, we could release a new version every month if we had to, right? We could. We feel quality-wise we could do it, but what would be in it? So seriously. So what we're going to do is we're going to release new versions of SQL Server as we feel we've got major capabilities that somebody wants. So if you look at SQL 16, there was so much stuff we wanted to get done that was not in a 14 or 12, and so we packed a lot in that release. Well, 17 came along very quickly, primarily because of Linux. We felt we needed to get to the market with Linux in a timely fashion, and so that's why 17 came out right out of the gate after 16, even though we put a bunch of other stuff in there.
Sure.
19 really was supposed to be 18. I gotta be honest with you. I mean, behind the scenes, if you go read my book, I think I said that, like, hey, it was really supposed to be SQL 18. And then this big data cluster thing we built, which is an amazing set of technology, it just wasn't ready yet. And we wanted that to be part of the release. And so we then deferred it to 19. Gotcha. So we are not on I'll tell you one thing, we're not on a 5-year cadence, that's for sure.
Right.
Yeah. But we would like to do things every year or so if we could in a major new release of SQL Server. There's all sorts of things the team is working on. But again, we're only going to do it in a way that we think we have something that's really compelling to go to market that's differentiating from what we did in the past. Customers are still just trying to put their head around SQL 19, to be honest with you.
Sure.
So maybe we'll give you a little bit of a break right now, let you breathe in what we've shipped in 19.
Yeah, let us catch up, read the book.
That's right.
Yeah,
read the book. Yeah, catch up and read the book. It's only 500 pages, no big deal.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. My wife saw the book and it's actually shorter than the Linux book I'd done previously.
Oh, wow.
And she still opened up and she goes like, who's gonna read this? Like, is this something they're just gonna look at it? I'm like, no, somebody's gonna go through it, So yeah, there's a lot there, that's for sure.
There you go. And so, compañeros, if you get the book, now that's one of your responsibilities is to let us know so that Bob can tell his wife that he had some people go through the book.
That's right. I want to hear that people like the book, because whenever time she sees stuff like this or my presentation, she said, do people like this? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, there is something wrong with all of you. There's something really wrong with you guys. And I'm like, we know that. We get it. We own it.
We get paid a lot of money to be messed up.
We do get paid a lot of money to be messed up. I agree. I actually agree. So that was a fun book for me to write. I really enjoyed that. The Sql Linux book was great because just let you know, before I joined Microsoft, I was a Unix developer. We didn't have Linux back then. I was a Unix developer with Oracle and C++ in my older days.
Wow.
And when I joined Microsoft, I couldn't believe I was joining this little PC company. Like, why would I do PC stuff? And so when Linux came around, I took the opportunity to write that book because it was fun to go back into the Unix environment. But 19 was just passion for me because I was involved in the very beginning from the 19 planning with the team. All the different meetings we had in the early days. We call it Project Seattle. That was kind of fun to name it that. Project Eris was big data cluster. So being from the very beginning and looking at the early days and the early meetings, it was fun to write that book because for me it was a journey from end to end, all the way to launching it to do it. And so it was a fun labor of love.
So I do have a question about SQL Server on Linux.
Yeah.
I think when it was first announced, I definitely did not appreciate the evil master plan that's now kind of come to fruition, right? Because it makes sense that then it came to Docker and then big data clusters and now on a Raspberry Pi. And I guess something I've always wondered is when you all were first moving it to Linux, did you have this full evil master plan, or did you just have the idea okay, no, we want to go to Linux? Because I just when it first came out, I was like, are you trying to compete with Postgres, which is free? Or are you hoping to steal some Oracle customers? I didn't see the picture, but now it's oh, this has opened up so many opportunities for SQL Server.
Sure. The answer is yes to all those questions.
Yeah.
we want all those customers.
Right.
It's funny because, in my organization, Azure Data, we have a Postgres MySQL team, and they're always, talking to me like, hey,
talking trash.
This is where I'll really pull in people like Slava Oaks and Rohan Kumar, Travis Wright, some of these people in those early days. As soon as we went to SQL on Linux, we knew we could do containers.
Right.
because containerization is just a natural evolution for a Linux, customer. And Docker, and not Docker's not the only player in town, but container runtimes were becoming a thing as we launched SQL Linux. They've been around for a while, but really started to kick in. Kubernetes starting to kick in. Brendan Burns works for Microsoft. He's influencing us, what we're doing. So we knew we could do Linux, Kubernetes, containers right out of the gate. In fact, when we launched SQL Linux, we also announced container support right out of the gate. So we knew that in building SQL Linux.
Gotcha.
Edge is a little different story, but it is interesting to let you know that we have been working on this for a while. I would say, I have to go back and double check, but it's possible we were thinking along the lines of this type of thing as far back as SQL on Linux. And the idea was not necessarily at the beginning this, but it was, can we do SQL on ARM devices?
Right.
We knew that was a market. Hey, if you look at SQL Linux, just real quick, just make sure I make it clear here. It wasn't like we said, let's go get, the
right, exactly.
Oracle. No, we didn't say that. What we said was, it was actually people come to us. Red Hat, other customers said, I really like your product. In my shop, we have a lot of Windows with SQL. We have a bunch of Linux stuff. Can you do the Linux thing? Have y'all thought about that? And if you go look at that Linux book, it was this amazing idea of using this drawbridge project that Slava took on. This is when Slava came back into our organization. It was specifically hired back in by Rohan to go figure out this Linux thing.
Right.
And he quickly realized, instead of trying to rewrite the entire code, I'll use this PAL technology to quickly get to market with it. So, once we did that, it just opened up so many doors for us. And so when we had the confidence that we could run SQL on Linux, we said, well, ARM processors, what the heck? We can do that. So the biggest challenge was not actually the ARM piece, it was the footprint of SQL Server. So Robert Dorr, one of my dear friends, that's the other Bob of Bob SQL. He's the smarter Bob. Again, he's another person that I look like Penny from The Big Bang Theory with when I get in a room with him. And he was instrumental in working with the developers to figure a way to reduce the footprint. You ever see the movie Pearl Harbor? Where they're on the runway, they're trying to figure out how to launch the planes off the aircraft carrier, these big bombers. So they're in there ripping everything out of the plane. They're getting all the weight out so they actually could lift off. So they in one scene they take the machine guns and put black broomsticks in there to make it look like they had a gun, right? Now this isn't the same comparison, but it's a similar exercise where the team went and said, what is all the stuff in that SQL engine over the years that nobody really cared the footprint of that we really do care? But you still make it a very powerful thing. And so Linux gave us the confidence we could do amazing projects like this. So yes, to your question, there is a master evil plan as part of it. It was also still a journey though, because we didn't even know that we really could, pull this off until we really started digging into it. So.
Yeah, well, I'll be excited to use it as just for personal projects because SQLite doesn't allow you to delete columns. I don't know if you knew that, but
oh no, I've seen some of those kind of type restrictions. And the only thing you'll find is in-memory OTP is something that we couldn't fit into this. That's a pretty much of a hog, right?
You have to have memory to do in-memory OLT.
But you'd be surprised. This thing has 32 gig of RAM, and it's like as much RAM as my laptop here. So these things have a lot of RAM in them. But other than that, there's some really powerful engine features, that are still in here. Just the same stuff we use. They're in the product. So all using containers. So
nice.
Very cool. So last questions, guys, or should we do SQL Family?
No, I'm thoroughly impressed. Very good pleasure to get to meet you, Bob.
Well, thank you. But I just want to say one thing, and I really mean this to the bottom of my heart. It's not me. I'm just a messenger. I mean, I have this amazing, talented, nice, respectable people all up in Seattle. They're all virtual right now. I see them all the time virtual. Right. They don't know how I do virtual. Like, how have you been doing this for years? They are some of the coolest, smartest people I've ever met, and they're the ones that are behind all of this. And that's why in the books, I'm very passionate about making sure I include all the people behind the scenes that wrote the product, that worked on the product. So, when you go read these books, look for those little names and stuff where I interview them and say, hey, how'd you come up with this idea? And they're like, oh, we were sitting around one day in the conference room and just, we'd heard all this customer feedback. And then before you know it turned into a project. That's how smart these people are. So yeah, thank you for that comment, but I have such an amazing team that builds this. It's easy to write this stuff and talk about it.
Yeah. And the program managers have been great. I mean, so you mentioned Travis and Jose and some of the, I'm forgetting some of the ones now, but
think of Pamela Hood and Pedro Lopes and Joe Sack and Denzel Ribeiro. Right. I mean, Ajay Jagannathan. I mean, you just go down the list of so many talented people, and we're hiring more. I just feel honored every day to work with these folks.
So that's a maybe so guesstimate, right? And and hopefully this is shareable information, right? So how many people would you say work on the SQL Server product?
It's hard to pin that down exactly because since I said the SQL Server is across all of this, we have SQL Server folks that work on parts of the SQL engine that kind of focus on more the cloud a little bit, but parts of what they do go into the SQL engine on premises. We have people that work on the SQL Server engine, and they're starting to work on things that are going into the cloud. So it's not like there's just one team called the In fact, we really do say, I know you introduced my title, and I've tried to change that now to just say Azure Data, because across Azure Data, we have a lot of people working on what gets shipped as SQL Server, shipped as SQL Edge, shipped as Azure SQL. I couldn't even begin to tell you. I'd have to go look. I'd have to look at the org chart, to be honest with you. I work with so many people. They're all so talented from many different types of walks of what they do, both PMs and engineers. So I couldn't even begin to tell you the number, to be honest with you. But I wouldn't say it's like nuts. But it's
sure.
There's a large number of people working on it. For sure.
Well, I guess I bring that up only to say again, going back to kind of circling back to the beginning, this idea of getting a little concerned about the direction of SQL Server. You think about an organization as large as Microsoft, they're putting a pretty good investment, right, into this.
All I know is that when the chief financial officer of Microsoft comes out and talks about the results of the company, and your product is usually mentioned in those things, you feel pretty good about the direction you're headed. So yeah, that's the way I look at it.
There's that, right?
There's that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's see. Compañeros. So in our next iteration, so this is technically season 4, which may mean nothing to you, more just organizational probably for us. We changed some of the advertising and things like that. We're trying to do video, change things up a little bit.
The declining season.
Yeah.
Usually 3 is where things are. And now it's all down.
We jumped the shark, and now we're just trying all the gimmicks.
Yeah. Well, trying to keep up with SQL Server, right?
The T-shirt giveaways didn't work. Now we're doing video and book giveaways.
That's right. Okay, so we have a new set of SQL family questions, right? So this
SQL family questions. I think I was sent to these. I'm looking at them now. Interesting. Okay.
The first time that you've gotten them, and so no pressure. You have to let us know you like them.
Okay.
Amanda, our producer, her job is only at stake. If you don't like them, no, I'm just kidding. But
it's awkward because she's family. So whenever you have to fire family, it gets real. Thanksgiving's the worst.
Yeah. Oh no, but these are anyway. We hope you like them, company.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah, we are sticking with one, right? So going back all the way back in time, you gave us a little bit of history here, but in terms of how did you get started with SQL Server?
Fun story. So 1993, my wife and I found we're going to have our first child. I was traveling a lot for American Airlines back in those days, a subsidiary of American Airlines, and I didn't want to travel anymore. So I'm at a couple's baby shower, and a former colleague of my wife walks up to me at the party and says, "You're a database guy, right?" And I'm like, I looked at her. I'm an Oracle expert back then. I'm like, yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
She goes, "Hey, well, Microsoft's hiring database people." And I'm like, who would go work for Microsoft? I mean, I just looked at her like, I'm a Unix server, C++ guy. You guys,
I'm a serious guy. Like,
get those Windows things you do, PC things. So that was the first. She started working for Microsoft, and they invited me up for an interview. I went ahead and took it. I flew up to Seattle in those days. I did an interview in Bellevue, Washington, downtown Bellevue, Washington. And when I got back, I was like, I don't know. And then the hiring manager, Andrea Stepani, who I still have occasionally talked to recently, she called me at home and said, "Hey, look, you're you're a programmer, developer. We need people to help us with the future of this thing. We're going to give you access to the source code to help us look at stuff." I'm like, source code? Really? And the location was ideal for me. I live in Northwestern Hills, Texas. This is in Irving, Texas, not a long drive. I was doing some contracting work then. I wanted a little more solid work. So I started and thought maybe I'd be there a year or so, Here I am.
You've run out of fingers and toes.
Exactly. So yeah, kind of a fun story to get started with SQL.
Yeah, very cool. So you never know. I guess, you have to even do the networking at the baby shower.
Yeah. Go do networking at baby showers. That'll help you get a job.
So now, having said all of that, right now, what advice would you give to someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? Now, admittedly, you've kind of, we've all
I have a weird career right now, right?
Right.
But I did start in support though. And, a lot of people maybe discount that job. That's a harder job. Well, developers are going to be mad when I say this, but They used to say it to me, though. Paul Rando used to say him all the time, you got a hard job than me, man. So support can be a very difficult job. And Microsoft, I think, probably hiring right now support people. So support's hard because you're combining this customer service skills with deep technical knowledge. A lot of people don't realize that you can get involved in a company like Microsoft doing technical support. Microsoft has something called a mock program where we hire people to go do those kind of things. So that's one consideration if you just like technology. I would say still, though, today, think about Azure and the cloud. As much of a big deal SQL Server is, if you start getting experience, you start studying Azure and getting knowledge of that, and you walk into somebody and says, I know Azure, you got a good shot at getting hired. To be honest with you, or Amazon Web Services, pick a cloud technology like that, and then combine that with, say, like database skills or development skills. And I would recommend that to anybody right now trying to launch their career or start their career.
There you go. What's one thing that can instantly make your day better?
Oh, that's an easy answer. Looking at my wife. I mean, seeing my wife every morning. But it's really true. I mean. No, yeah. Hey, Ginger. My beautiful wife, Ginger, is this typical sweet Southern woman, but tough as nails, and perhaps the nicest person in the entire world. And waking up and seeing her, smiling, and she's always got, bright smile, especially even during our virus situation, all things are going on. She's kept such a great attitude during all of it. Funniest thing she said to me, though, a couple of weeks ago, she said, now, when do you travel again? You're here a lot, right? So, but no, absolutely Ginger. That would be it's easy answer.
There you go. Now you have $10,000. What computer or tech would you purchase?
I'm just an old school SQL guy, right? Like I would love to get myself a souped up server. I think I want my own little data center. Can I have a data center? I get the Ward data center. I'll just be my own. I'll start renting it out. Right?
Yeah, there we go. I was going to say, I'm not sure if $10,000 will get you there.
I don't know, man. You'd be surprised these days. I probably could get something pretty massive. I don't know. I would have to be like this.
Yeah.
Or eBay,
yeah. Maybe get another laptop or something. I don't know. I guess I'm not a tech head as much as like Adam Saxon. Adam Saxon, of course, would probably tell you he wants an entire studio recording, super uber duper camera. I don't know if you know Adam, but he's all full of monitors too. So maybe I should get that, like a huge monitor bigger than I have right now that I'm looking at. So maybe that's what it is. I'll get a new, cool, widescreen Adam Saxton bending, monitor or something like that. How's that sound?
So the next time you're on this podcast, you can be like, hey.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You can tell Adam I said that too.
Okay. So which famous person in history would you want to spend the day with?
There is no question in my mind. It would be Jesus. I would love to be like with the apostles. I just want to see all that happen. I just up close. I'm a deep Christian man, a deep of faith, and to be part of that history and to see that live would be absolutely amazing. Just to get to ask him a question. Hey, can I ask you a question? It's a really wise question. He'll come back with the wise answer, obviously. So, but yeah, that would be the person for sure.
I don't know. It's funny you say about asking him a question, but it seems like at least in the Bible, like half the time the disciples are like, what did you say?
Oh, I know. I'd ask. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to ask a question. He's going to come back with something else. I'm like, can you do a parable real quick on that one? And then I won't get that. And then it'll take a while. And then he'll say, oh, you don't have enough faith, Bob. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I know, Jesus, I don't.
There you go.
But yeah, it would be Jesus for sure.
If you haven't read The Kingdom and the Crown, I will forward that series to you.
Okay, please do.
It's a very interesting
awesome
take, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and our new, well, maybe not quite so last question, but our last SQL family question is, what's your favorite ice cream topping?
Favorite ice cream topping?
Yeah,
I would say like whipped cream and nuts or something. I like nuts, sprinkled nuts with any kind of ice cream. So I love combining peanuts with a lot of stuff like that. So it'd be sprinkled nuts and whipped cream or something probably. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that. Bob, thanks so much for being on the program today.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm really serious about the books. Carlos, just contact me offline and I will donate the books as you guys see accordingly to give to your listeners, and I'll be happy to sign all of them as well.
There you go. Yeah, so we will make that available. SQLDataPartners.com/Bob Ward. We'll have the show notes for today's episode. We'll have like the links for the consistent time recovery and some of the other things we talked about in today's episode, and a way for you to sign up to get the books. First come, first serve, compañeros. So if you listen right when the show comes out, hats off to you, and you'll have access to the book. Okay, so as we wrap up, we do want to give a little love to some compañeros out there, showing a little love for the podcast. Ruben Escobar, down in Costa Rica. Kono Babino loves the podcast, and then recommends, he's like, well, I want to talk about Snowflake. I'm like, Kono? Okay, right? But
okay, Kono.
I try, I have to stop drinking my Microsoft Kool-Aid for a little while, I guess. Okay, so Warren Dean, again, right, giving us some love on the podcast, and
Warren.
Gino Senna, right? So she's Gino's new DBA rather, learning from the podcast. So thanks,
Yay,
Gino, for linking out, for reaching out rather. Okay, so as always, compañeros, we are interested in your topics and what you want to hear. So we mentioned there that Kono wants to talk about Snowflake. We have gotten lots of requests for more traditional engine type things. So Bob would be proud of us for going back to some of that. We've been doing a lot of Power BI lately, and so we will promise that we will return to our SQL Server roots here and talk about some of that stuff.
Awesome.
But we haven't forgotten all about Power BI. We still have some Power BI.
People probably think it's my fault. You're the one who's always pushing it. I just got an email from Amanda like, we need more Power BI topics. I'm like, I'm running out of ideas here.
Yeah, so this is the dirty little secret, right? Is that, well, so Bob knows, right? So it's great talking about this stuff, but coming up with all that content, oh my gosh. I need to reach out to people who have it all together, right? Yes. Like that's always the big piece. Anyway, so if people wanted to reach out to you, Bob, how would they do that?
BobWard@Microsoft.com. And you can follow me at Twitter. I'm not Adam Saxton. I'm not this big Twitter guy, but I do get out there a litlittle bit. So at BobWardMS, and then just Bob Ward for Microsoft on LinkedIn. I forgot the exact LinkedIn profile, but I'm the only Bob Ward from Microsoft on LinkedIn. So
there you go.
Love to hear from you.
Eugene?
Yeah, you can find me at SQLGene on Twitter and SQLGene.com.
Kevin?
He took a strategic drink of water.
Perfect timing. Timing.
If you open up Bob's book on SQL Server 2019, go to the Polybase chapter. The second letter of the fifth word of every paragraph combined together will give you access to the IRC channel that I hang out in.
Kevin, you gave away our secret, the National Treasure Code. The National Treasure Code, you gave it away. Gosh, Kevin, you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, now he's not going to invite you back.
That's hilarious.
Kevin, right?
That's actually a pretty cool answer.
Kevin never gives a straight answer for that question.
It was a good one, though. I had to think about my second. I'm like, did I do that?
Try it and see.
Yeah, I got to give it a shot. I'm going to be after the thing going, wow, it really worked. Kevin was, subliminal when I was writing it. Bob, put this in.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh man,
that is hilarious. And compañeros, you can reach out to me. Thank you again for showing the podcast a little love and for giving us feedback on things you think we should be talking about. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm at Carlos L. Chacon. I think that's going to do it for today's episode. We'd like to thank Bob again for coming on, and Eugene and Kevin for helping me out here.
Yeah.
And compañeros, we'll see you on the SQL Trail.
SQL Data Partners.